Hello, friends. Thank you for being here. I'm so glad you're here at Non-Toxic Home. Today's video is a little bit different. We're going to read Lockstep today. Now, this is from Scenarios for the Future of Technology and International Development. It's from Rockefeller. All right. This I will link to below. I apologize. I will be looking above you, which is really above my webcam. So I apologize if you find that irksome. However, I strongly recommend that you read along. Lockstep starts on page 18 of this document that I'm linking to. This is really important that you read it so that we know what we're looking at right now. Now, your opinion may vary from mine, and that's just fine. I support your right to have a different opinion than what I have. Now, the reason I'm reading this with you and or for you is because that everyone learns differently and everyone processes differently. So I want to ensure that those who don't really have the best ability to read and digest and process and retain information from reading, who may benefit from reading and hearing it as well, or just hearing it, can gain some information here. I'm also going to add a little bit of commentary. I'm going to try to limit that as my internet upload speed is incredibly slow, and this will probably take hours upon hours to upload. I'm not joking. So here we go. We go to page 18, Lockstep, a world of tighter top-down government control and more authoritarian leadership with limited innovation and growing citizen pushback. In 2012, the pandemic that the world had been anticipating for years finally hit. Unlike 2009's and H1N1, this new influenza strain, originating from wild geese, was extremely virulent and deadly. Even the most pandemic-prepared nations were quickly overwhelmed when the virus streaked around the world, infecting nearly 20% of the global population and killing 8 million in just 7 months, the majority of them healthy young adults. The pandemic also had a deadly effect on economies. International mobility of both people and goods screeched to a halt, debilitating industries like tourism and breaking global supply chains. Even locally, normally bustling shops and office buildings sat empty for months, devoid of both employees and customers. The pandemic blanketed the planet, though disproportionate numbers died in Africa, Southeast Asia, and Central America, where the virus spread like wildfire in the absence of official containment protocols. But even in developed countries, containment was a challenge. The United States' initial policy of strongly discouraging citizens from flying proved deadly in its leniency, accelerating the spread of the virus not just within the US, but across borders. However, a few countries did fare better, China in particular. Suddenly, China is what we should look up to? What happened, 2020? What happened? The Chinese government's quick imposition and enforcement of mandatory quarantine for all citizens, as well as its instant and near hermetic sealing off of all borders, saved millions of lives, stopping the spread of the virus far earlier than in other countries and enabling a swifter post-pandemic recovery. China's government was not the only one that took extreme measures to protect its citizens from risk and exposure. During the pandemic, national leaders around the world flexed their authority and imposed airtight rules and restrictions, from the mandatory wearing of face masks. Hello? Are you hearing this? Mandatory wearing of face masks. We're seeing this. To body temperature checks at the entries to communal spaces like train stations and supermarkets. We're seeing this too, folks. Even after the pandemic faded, this more authoritarian control and oversight of citizens and their activities stuck and even intensified. Everything we've read so far has pretty much happened, right? Whew. In order to protect themselves from the spread of increasingly global problems, from pandemics and transnational terrorism to environmental crises and rising poverty, leaders around the world took a firmer grip on power. At first, the notion of a more controlled world gained wide acceptance and approval. Citizens willingly gave up some of their sovereignty and their privacy, to more paternalistic states in exchange for greater safety and stability. That's an illusion. Citizens were more tolerant and even eager for top-down direction and oversight. National leaders had more latitude to impose order in the ways they saw fit. In developed countries, this heightened oversight took many forms. Biometric IDs for all citizens, for example, tighter regulations of key industries whose stability was deemed vital to national industries. We've seen that too, folks. In many developed countries, enforced cooperation with a suite of new regulations and agreements slowly but steadily restored both order and, importantly, economic growth. Across the developing world, however, the story was different and much more variable. Top-down authority took different forms in different countries, hinging largely on the capacity, caliber, and intentions of their leaders. In countries with strong and thoughtful leaders, citizens' overall economic status and quality of life increased. In India, for example, air quality drastically improved after 2016 when the government outlawed high-emitting vehicles. In Ghana, the introduction of ambitious government programs to improve basic infrastructure and ensure the availability of clean water for all her people led to a sharp decline in waterborne diseases. But more authoritarian leadership worked less well, and in some cases tragically, in countries run by irresponsible elites. Can't believe they use the word elite here. Who used their increased power to pursue their own interests at the expense of their citizens. There were other downsides, as the rise of virulent nationalism created new hazards. Spectators at the 2018 World Cup, for example, wore bulletproof vests that sported a patch of their national flag. Strong technology regulations stifled innovation, kept costs high, and curbed adoption. In the developing world, access to approved technologies increased, but beyond that remained limited. The locus of technology innovation was largely in the developed world, leaving many developing countries on the receiving end of technologies that others consider best for them. Some governments found this patronizing and refused to distribute computers and other technologies that they scoffed at as secondhand. Meanwhile, developing countries with more resources and better capacity began to innovate internally to fill these gaps on their own. Meanwhile, in the developed world, the presence of so many top-down rules and norms greatly inhibited entrepreneurial activity. Scientists and innovators were often told by governments what research lines to pursue. This is happening. They were guided mostly towards projects that would make money, e.g. market-driven product development, or were, quote, sure bets, such as fundamental research, leaving more risky or innovative research areas largely untapped. Well-off countries and monopolistic companies with big research and development budgets still made significant advances, but the IP behind their breakthroughs remained locked behind strict national or corporate protection. Russia and India imposed stringent domestic standards for supervising and certifying encryption-related products and their suppliers, a category that in reality meant all IT innovations. The US and EU struck back with retaliatory national standards, throwing a wrench in the development and diffusion of technology globally. So they're saying here that we all need to work together worldwide. Especially in the developing world, acting in one's national self-interest often meant seeking practical alliances that fit with those interests, whether it was gaining access to needed resources or banding together in order to achieve economic growth. In South America and Africa, regional and sub-regional alliances became more structured. Kenya doubled its trade with Southern and Eastern Africa as new partnerships grew within the continent. China's investment in Africa expanded as the bargain of new jobs and infrastructure in exchange for access to key minerals or food exports proved agreeable to many governments. Now, China is investing in Africa, especially North Africa. Think grand solar minimum here, friends. Cross-border ties proliferated in the form of official security aid, While the deployment of foreign security teams was welcomed in some of the most dire failed states, one-size-fits-all solutions yielded few positive results. By 2025, people seem to be growing weary of so much top-down control and letting leaders and authorities make choices for them. Wherever national interests clashed with individual interests, there was conflict. Sporadic pushback became increasingly organized and coordinated as disaffected youth and people who had seen their status and opportunities slip away, largely in developing countries, incited civil unrest. In 2026, protesters in Nigeria brought down the government, fed up with the entrenched cronyism and corruption. I find this so funny to read this from this specific agency talking about entrenched cronyism and corruption. Even those who liked the greater stability and predictability of this world began to grow uncomfortable and constrained by so many tight rules and by the strictness of national boundaries. The feeling lingered that sooner or later something would inevitably upset the neat order that the world's governments had worked so hard to establish. Now, if you scroll down to the next page, it has some headlines in Lockstep. 2013, quarantine restricts in-person contact. Quarantine's part of this. Intercontinental trade is hit. That's happened. They're talking about filling the gap of caregiving with robots. That's happening. Vietnam requires a solar panel in every home. Don't know anything about that. The role of philanthropy in Lockstep. This is important. This is really important because philanthropy is not what we're told. Philanthropic organizations will face hard choices in this world. Given the strong role of governments, doing philanthropy will require heightened diplomacy skills and the ability to operate effectively in extremely divergent environments. Philanthropy, grantee, and civil society relationships will be strongly moderated by government, and some foundations might choose to align themselves more closely with national official development assistance strategies and government objectives. This is already happening. This is already happening. Larger philanthropies will retain an outsized share of influence, and many smaller philanthropies may find value in merging financial, human, and operational resources. Philanthropic organizations interested in promoting universal rights and freedoms will get blocked at many nations' borders. Developing smart, flexible, and wide-ranging relationships in this world will be key. Some philanthropies may choose to work only in places where their skills and services don't meet resistance. Many governments will place severe restrictions on the program areas and geographies that international philanthropies can work in, leading to a narrower and stronger geographic focus or grant making in their home country only. Now, philanthropy is just another hand of all of this. If you think that people are giving billions and billions and millions of their dollars for these people who are really insanely rich without expecting their back to be scratched, you're a bit delusional. I'm sorry. So technology in Lockstep. This is really, really, really important. Well, there's no way of accurately predicting what the important technological advancements will be in the future. The scenario narratives point to areas where conditions may enable or accelerate the development of certain kinds of technologies. Thus, for each scenario, we offer a sense of the context for technological innovation, taking into consideration the pace, geography, and key creators. We also suggest a few technology trends and applications that could flourish in each scenario. Technological innovation in Lockstep is largely driven by government and is focused on issues of national security and health and safety. Most technological improvements are created by and for developed countries, shaped by government's dual desire to control and monitor their citizens. I'm going to read that again. Most of the technology is created by and for developed countries, shaped by government's dual desire to control and to monitor their citizens. In states with poor governance, large-scale projects that fail to progress abound. Here's some trends and applications we might see. Scanners using fMRI technology become the norm at airports and other public areas to detect abnormal behavior that may indicate antisocial intent. Let me pick that apart for you a little bit. Antisocial intent. That means they haven't done anything, but they intend to, and they're thinking about it. Or they might not be thinking about it. They could be thinking about maybe Maybe I left the stove on. Did I leave the stove on? And before you know it, there's a pre-crime unit showing up and you're arrested. In the aftermath of pandemic scares, smarter packaging for food and beverages is applied first by big companies and producers in a business-to-business environment and then adopted for individual products and consumers. This is already happening as well. They want to trace every single product that you purchase. You will have likely a limited carbon footprint that is permitted for your existence on Earth. Once you exceed your carbon footprint, once you are taking more than you're producing, you're finished. New diagnostics are developed to detect communicable diseases. The application of health screening also changes. Screening becomes a prerequisite for release from a hospital or prison, successfully slowing the spread of many diseases. I call bull. Telepresence technologies respond to the demand for less expensive, lower bandwidth, sophisticated communication systems for populations whose travel is restricted, which is going to be everyone, because we're all going to be on lockdown, on rolling lockdown anyways. Driven by protectionism and national security concerns, nations create their own independent, regionally defined IT networks, mimicking China's firewalls. We want to mimic China's firewalls. Governments have varying degrees of success in policing internet traffic, but these efforts nevertheless fracture the, quote, World Wide Web. So we'll see how long this video stays up, right? There's also a description of a Manisha. I'm sorry, I don't know how to say the name of a woman who discusses what it's like to live in lockstep. I think she was in India or something like that. Now there are a few other scenarios as well, and I highly recommend reading them because they are applicable. However, we are in lockstep. It's clear as day, in my opinion, but we are in lockstep, in my personal opinion. Now, if you go down to Clever Together to the technology part is really important in this 52, 54 page document. Technology and Clever Together. They talk here about a malaria developed and deployed broadly. And there are also mind-controlled prosthetics that aid people in developing countries. Solar power is talked about. Of course, they're not talking about the grand solar minimum. Intelligent electricity, that means smart meters. Intelligent water distribution, smart meters. And transportation systems developed in urban areas. In these, quote, smart cities, internet access is seen as a basic right by the late 2010s. Now, we're in 2020 right now. As I read this, and internet access is seen as a basic right for the most part right now. The cost of capturing data through nanosensors, that means they're too small for you to see, and smart networks falls precipitously. That means it gets cheap. And there's a new surveillance. I'm sorry, I believe that's French, so I don't know how to say it. These mechanisms improve governance and enable more efficient use of government resources. And they're flexible and rapid mobile payment systems. While the world is hampered by entrenched banking interests in regulation. Let's see, so that was Clever Together. I'm sorry, my internet and my computer is a little bit slow right now, but I wanted to be sure that you heard this as well as read it and saw it for yourself. Now we are at Hack Attack, where basically there's a lot of hackers around. Nothing new there, right? So for technology in Hack Attack, you have new threats like weaponized biological pathogens and destructive botnets, and people are focused on those threats. But enduring technology like the AK-47 also remains a weapon of choice for global guerrillas. Echoing the rise of synthetic chemicals in the 19th century, synthetic biology, often state-funded, is used to grow resources and foodstuffs that have become scarce. Ooh, now this speaks to the grand solar minimum right here, friends, right? I mean, if there isn't an ability to grow biologic food, then what do you have? You have synthetic food. And what do we have today? We have, goodness, there's fake meat, and they're attacking our meat supply. And quite frankly, I'm a vegetarian, so don't come after me for that. And we'll most likely will be seeing insect protein, and we will have a daily or weekly allotment for it. This is all public information. This isn't anything secret at all. I'm not speaking anything secretive here. Now in Smart Scramble, energy technology improvements are geared more towards efficiency, and there are local improvements in geothermal energy and wind energy. The global medicine supply chain breaks down. And we already see that as well, right, friends? That's happening too. That accelerates the emergence of locally bioengineered super strength homeopathic remedies, which replace antibiotics in the dispensaries of many developing world hospitals. I don't like the bioengineered part, but super strength homeopathic remedies, I'll sign up for that. I think it's really odd and interesting that that is in here, considering Rockefellers being who they are and what they're involved in, how they made their money, which is oil. So interesting. Widespread micro-manufacturing using 3D printers enables the fabrication of replacement components for engines and machines, allowing perpetual maintenance to compensate for broken trade links. I think that's pretty cool too. There are garden allotments here in this scenario, Smart Scramble. Garden allotments proliferate in mega cities as new urban dwellers seek to supplement a scarce food supply and maintain their agricultural heritage. Now, initially this sounds great, right? Garden allotments in cities, sign me up, right? Well, here's the thing. If you read that, new urban dwellers are trying to supplement their scarce food supply and maintain their agricultural heritage. So family farms going out of business, that's happening, and we're going to see that a lot more, friends, and that's really concerning. I'm sure you've seen the articles about the farmers who've been directed to dump their milk. Some farmers are posting on YouTube about these huge harvests of onions and other vegetables that are organically grown, and they have nothing to do with them. What are they going to do with them? So this sounds good, right? Garden allotment, but these are people who are no longer able to make their living from the land, or they've been forcibly removed from the land, which is another possibility. And then, of course, it talks more about high-speed internet access. But most rural poor remain cut off from access. So I hope this has been an interesting video for you. I apologize for the length. However, I didn't write Lockstep. Thanks so much for being here. Please like, subscribe, share with like-minded individuals or those who you think might benefit from hearing this rather than just reading it. Thanks so much. Have a beautiful, blessed day. Bye, friends.